What? I haven't booked a flight for Harmony, of course not. This is a family trip. You, an older lady, should just go home and clean the house. If the house is dirty when we return, you'll truly be out of the family this time. I'm stunned by Nancy's words. I was looking forward to today's trip, coming all the way to the airport only to find out that my flight wasn't booked, and I can't go. I've put up with Nancy's unreasonable behavior for so long, enduring it because she's family. I've forgiven Nancy. I'm appalled that this is the result. I thought we were family, but it turns out I was the only one who thought so. Nancy clearly stated that she doesn't consider me family, so I should act accordingly towards someone who's not family. Alone, thoroughly, that's for sure. Deciding this, I went back home. My name is Harmony, a 64-year-old housewife. I live with my husband, Raymond. We have a son, Spencer, who married a few years ago and started his own family. This is the woman I want to marry. That's how Spencer introduced Nancy. They were colleagues at work, sporting and competing with each other since they got employed. Eventually, Nancy became an indispensable part of Spencer's life, and he decided to marry her. That was my first time meeting Nancy, a woman with a charming smile and a solid character. I thought she would be a good match for Spencer. I believed a new happy life was starting for them. Spencer and I, along with my husband, lived together. Spencer suggested it to support us in our old age, but it was the beginning of a tragedy. That day, I was enjoying a coffee break with Nancy. I served baked goods I received from a friend and made coffee. We chatted, but Nancy seemed dissatisfied. This pastry isn't very tasty. Are you saying offering me this, Harmony? After Nancy's command, I tasted the pastry myself. However, I found it delicious. It was from a renowned pastry shop known for its long queues. My friend had waited in line especially for me. There was no way it wasn't delicious. If it doesn't suit your taste, I'm sorry. But this pastry is from a shop famous for its queues. My friend specially got it for me. It's unlikely to be bad. Indeed, I found it delicious, so I couldn't agree with Nancy's opinion of it being unpleasant. It was a perfect match with coffee and not too rich, making it easy to eat. That's why I got upset and confronted Nancy. Are you challenging me, Harmony? That's brave. Who is it living here under whose roof? I can report to Spencer about your harassment. You know, I had no intention of harassing her. I merely stated the facts. Yet Nancy threatened to report me for harassment. Normally, I would have clearly stated such threats were wrong, but what if Spencer believed Nancy's words? The thought of him believing Nancy's lie about me harassing her scared me, and I couldn't say anything more. When I fell silent, Nancy seemed pleased and didn't say any more harsh words, continuing to enjoy the coffee break. I noticed Nancy eating more pastries than me, despite claiming they were untasty. By this time, our relationship had already gone awry. Not trying to fix it was proof of my cowardice. If I had reported Nancy's harsh words to Spencer or Raymond, then maybe the terrible outcome could have been avoided. But I was too afraid to break the family bond, so I did nothing and didn't even think of doing anything, even though I knew it would lead to a terrible result. Nancy's selfish actions didn't stop there. One day, she dressed up to go out. That itself wasn't a concern, but there were still household chores to be done. I'm going out for tea with friends. Please handle the housework alone, Harmony. I was taken aback by Nancy's words. Originally, there was a rule about household chores. The rule was that Nancy and I, both housewives, would share the chores. Now, Nancy was about to break that rule. Isn't that against the rules? We need to do our share of the chores properly. When I confronted her, Nancy puffed her cheeks in dissatisfaction and said, Can't you just not ruin my mood by saying unnecessary things? I'm about to go enjoy myself, but you're right. The housework isn't done yet. Today was my day to clean. But can you do it for me, Harmony? Please finish everything by the time I get back in the evening. If it's not done, there will be consequences. It was already past noon that day, yet I was expected to clean the entire house from that point, which was too much. Finishing it by evening was an unreasonable demand. That's impossible. There is no way I can finish everything by evening. I clearly told Nancy that it was unfeasible. However, my words seemed to upset her. Frowning, Nancy retorted, Is that how a mother behaves? A mother-in-law should fulfill her daughter-in-law's whims. Doing the chores for me is part of your job as a mother-in-law, so please do your best with that. Nancy left the house, leaving behind a daunting task for me. I worked hard all day. It seemed Nancy had been neglecting her cleaning duties for the past few days, making it a tough job. Although it was difficult to finish by evening, I desperately managed to complete it. Just as Nancy was returning, Nancy seemed dissatisfied with it, but I was relieved it was over. I had been trying to get along with Nancy, enduring her unreasonable demands. Even when faced with an impossible challenge, I persevered and somehow managed to overcome it. Recognizing my effort, Spencer invited me on a trip. It was a vacation planned by Nancy, a 2-week stay in the Caribbean. We want to have a family trip, and we'll cover the expenses. How about it? Nancy's words made me feel that my efforts had been acknowledged. Without any objections, we agreed to the trip and prepared for our departure from America. On the day of the trip, we arrived at the airport with Spencer and his family. After checking the gate for our flight, I had a moment to relax. Let's have a great time on this trip. Looking forward to it, I spoke to Spencer and his family. I couldn't help but smile with anticipation. I was happy about going abroad, but more so that Nancy had planned a trip. It was surely going to be a wonderful journey. With this belief, I was startled when Nancy suddenly laughed. Did I say something funny? Puzzled, I tilted my head. And then Nancy dropped a bombshell. What? I didn't book a flight for Harmony. Isn't it obvious? This is a family trip. An unrelated older lady should just go home and clean. If the house is dirty when we return, I'll really kick you out of the family. I was shocked by Nancy's words. Not booked on a family trip flight? Wasn't this supposed to be a family vacation? No. Nancy had just excluded me from the family for petty reasons like being annoying or disliked. That realization brought a surge of indignation. So I devised a plan to make Nancy regret her actions. Understood then. I'll go back. I'll make sure the house is clean, so don't worry, I firmly told Nancy. The cold tension between us left Spencer and Raymond looking somewhat panicked. I had been silently enduring alone, but that ends today. As instructed by Nancy, I left the airport, but I hadn't given up on everything. I had a special plan in mind. To execute that plan, I returned home. Once home, I started cleaning as I was told. However, the cleaning was more thorough than usual on that day. I took care of various procedures first. I reserved a weekly rental apartment. Then, after having movers transfer all the furniture there, I thoroughly cleaned the house. I vacuumed the dust, mopped the floors, and even reapplied wax. If I was going to clean, it had to be done thoroughly. So thoroughly that it would be as if nothing had been there. Once the cleaning was done, I left the house and moved into the weekly rental. The next day, I visited a real estate agent. I decided to demolish the house and sell just the land. I completed the procedures for that. It seemed it would take about a week to demolish the house. Since Nancy and the others would return in 2 weeks, there wouldn't be a problem. I waited in the weekly rental, counting the days until the house would be reduced to land. A week later, I received confirmation that the house had been demolished as planned. I went to see the site where our house once stood. There, the land was completely cleared, with no trace of the house left. While I felt a twinge of sadness, my sense of satisfaction was greater. My preparation for revenge was complete. Now all I had to do was wait for Nancy's reaction upon realizing the current situation. During the remaining week before their return, I searched for a new house, anticipating their comeback. A week later, Nancy and the others were due to return. By then, I had already found a candidate for our new home and was just waiting to discuss it with Raymond. While relaxing at home, my mobile phone rang incessantly. I had a hunch who it might be from, but I checked anyway. It was Nancy. Hello, what's the matter? Honestly, dealing with her was a hassle, but my revenge wasn't over yet, and I was curious to hear her reaction to the state of the house. So, I answered the call. Nancy's voice was full of unusual tension, almost accusatory. What do you mean? What's the matter? Where are you? The house is a disaster. Come back quickly. It seemed they had already arrived home. They must have seen the barren site and called to ask me what had happened. I just cleaned it because you told me to. What's the problem with that? Did I do something wrong? I had merely cleaned. You told me to clean or else I would be punished, so I made sure it was spotlessly clean, leaving no trace behind. Yet here she was, angry at me, which was quite expected. Sure, I told you to clean, but I never said to go this far. Are you out of your mind? Everything is gone. We can't even live here now. Indeed, it was impossible to live there now. Nothing was left, just a vacant plot of land, and that land was already on the market, no longer ours. I cleaned because you told me to. If you're so unhappy with what I did, why don't you buy the land and build a new house, though? I doubt you and Spencer, who couldn't even live without relying on us, could afford to do that. Actually, our living together wasn't just about worrying for our old age. The truth was Spencer and Nancy were struggling financially. Spencer's salary was quite low. It was all due to the economic downturn. Until Nancy left her job to get married, Spencer's salary was decent. But then, a pandemic hit, leading to a recession, and his salary was significantly cut. That made it difficult for Spencer to sustain a living on his salary alone. Spencer had suggested Nancy find a job several times, but each time, my dream was to be a housewife. She refused, saying, in that situation, the only person Spencer could rely on was me. When I heard about their struggles, I immediately decided to live together. Living together would mean I'd pay the monthly $22,000 mortgage, easing their burden of rent. And honestly, we were financially comfortable, so I didn't plan to charge them for living expenses under the condition that they make efforts to improve their situation. We agreed to cover all their living expenses. That was the reason for our cohabitation. I had no idea about any of this. I never knew Harmony had so much money. I just assumed you were living off a pension, said Nancy. Indeed, what I did isn't something a normal person could do. $2,000 a month is a considerable amount, and only those with substantial financial means could afford it. Not to mention, I was also covering Spencer and his family's living expenses, which would amount to a significant sum. But I could afford it because, actually, my family runs that famous corporate group. My nephew is taking over now, but remember, my father passed away last year. We have more money than we can ever spend. Yes, my family has been chairing a well-known corporate group for generations. We are a family of wealthy individuals. From birth, I had access to a substantial amount of money. And after my father's death last year, I inherited a fortune that I couldn't possibly spend in a lifetime. That's not fair. Why didn't you tell us? We're family, aren't we? Hearing that I'm wealthy, Nancy yelled in panic. Why didn't I tell her? Because we're not family. After all the insults and disregard she showed me, her sudden change of attitude upon learning about my status was disgustingly selfish. Well, that doesn't matter now. What's important is I want to take Raymond with me. Can you stay there for a while? I'll come to pick you up. I did resent Nancy, but I felt sympathy for Spencer and Raymond, who were thrust into the situation without any consultation due to Nancy's selfish reasons. They, at least, had a right to live with me. Of course, their wishes would be the priority, but I needed to confirm their intentions. I hung up the phone and rushed to the side of our former house. When I arrived, Nancy and the others were waiting there. As I approached and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting," Nancy hurried towards me, pleading at my feet. "Please forgive me. I understand now that you are a remarkable person. Let's continue to live together, shall we? We're family after all." "Isn't it a bit harsh to abandon us over something like this?" Spencer concernedly asked. "Who was it that said we weren't family first?" Nancy, who had excluded me from the family, was now using the family card for her own preservation. It made me feel sick. "Weren't we not family? You didn't book a flight for me, did you? Leave me behind because we weren't family." Nancy had firmly stated we were not family when she didn't book my flight. But now, suddenly changing her tone to "we are family" was utterly deceitful. That was just a prank. Isn't it a bit narrow-minded to take it seriously? I wasn't serious. Just a prank, Nancy attempted to explain. "Was that supposed to be a joke?" I asked, incredulously. When the family trip was proposed, I felt genuinely relieved. I was ready to forgive all the terrible things Nancy had done up until that point. But that trust was betrayed. Nancy herself betrayed my feelings. I couldn't just let it go as a mere prank. "I'm sorry, Nancy, but I can't forgive you, no matter how much you apologize. Even if it was just a prank, I never will." So please, give up, I said firmly. I just couldn't take it anymore. I had tried to be part of Nancy's family, endured being burdened with housework, and even tried to stay positive despite her complaints. And in return, Nancy betrayed me mercilessly. She made it clear at the airport that we weren't family. All my efforts were in vain. No matter how much I considered Nancy family, she never saw me the same way. It was a painful reality, a fact I wanted to turn away from. But I couldn't escape it. My heart couldn't bear it anymore. I've tried my best so far to live together as a family, to fully accept you, Nancy, but I can't do it anymore. So please, please give up, I said decisively. Upon hearing my words, Nancy slumped down. So this is it, she muttered, exhausted. Spencer, concerned, called out to Nancy, but she gave no response. Honestly, I thought it might bother the neighbors, but I had no intention of dealing with Nancy any further, so I decided to leave her there. After confirming their intentions, both Raymond and Spencer said they wanted to come with me. So, I got them into the car, planning to head to the weekly rental apartment, when Nancy, who had been dazed until then, rushed over with a desperate look. Please don't leave me behind. I can't do without you. If you leave me like this, she clung to me, begging, but my mind was made up. I had no intention of taking Nancy with me. I'm sorry, but please give up. I only want to live with Raymond and Spencer. You're not family, Nancy, so it makes no sense for us to live together. It's absurd to support someone who is not family or live together. I supported her because we were family. But now that we're not, it's a different story. There's no reason for me to do anything for Nancy anymore. I left Nancy there and drove away. She cried the entire time, but it was a consequence of her own actions, so it couldn't be helped. After that, Spencer decided to divorce Nancy, as expected. Nancy was against it, resisted, and refused to divorce. However, when Spencer hired a lawyer and took it to court, it was revealed that Nancy had been misusing the living expenses, and the divorce proceeded smoothly. Of course, the misused money was claimed as compensation in the divorce settlement. It turned out Nancy didn't have the means to pay, but Spencer was firm and demanded repayment. Nancy tried to return to her parents' home, but Spencer had informed them of her actions beforehand, and outraged by her unreasonable behavior, her parents disowned her. Apparently, Nancy has been kicked out of the house. Now she lives alone, working day and night to pay off the compensation. Meanwhile, the three of us, Raymond, Spencer, and I, are living happily. After discussing it together, we moved to a new house and now enjoy a relaxed life. The issue with Nancy escalated more than I imagined, and I still feel a bit sad about missing the family trip to make up for it. Spencer planned another trip to the Caribbean for us. I want to travel as much as possible while I'm still healthy. I'm endlessly grateful to Spencer for fulfilling my wish. As a mother, I want to support him fully so he can rebuild